What's up coders, and welcome to this next video in the data dashboard series. In this we'll be setting up authentication for our app, and we want certain sections of the site to be restricted by authentication. So unless you are authenticated, you won't be able to view these parts of the site. We also want the information that is to be shown on the site, so things like username, email, avatar, so things like that profile image, we want to be able to be seen. We also want to make sure that we have a login form, a login page. We want to make sure that our header is set up to be able to show different states of being logged in and logged out. So if you're enjoying the series so far, make sure to subscribe below and keep informed of when we're going to be launching our next video. But without further ado, let's get building. So this is where we last left off. We had our header page here, our side menu, and our dashboard page. Now, a lot of the work that we're going to be doing today will be based on the header and rearranging this to work with our authentication. To start with, we want to make sure that we've got authentication set up, and then we can start rearranging the rest of the layout components. Let's go ahead and install NextAuth onto the app and get started. So NextAuth is my preferred way of doing authentication on NextJS, and it's really simple to get started. We'll start with Google authentication to get going. So if we go down here and it says npm install NextAuth, which we can do, let's open up our terminal. So for the rest of the series, we're going to be using Yarn from now on as our package manager. You can use npm still if you want, but I'll be using Yarn. So yarn add NextAuth, and we'll add NextAuth to the project, and then we'll simply run the server. We'll just put yarn dev. That's all still working fine. Cool. So you can see here it gives you an idea of what you need to do. These are the three main things you need to set up. So you need to set up the auth server, which you can do in the Pages API folder, which we'll do in a moment. Then you need to wrap your app in a session provider. We will do that momentarily, and then you add in your sign in and sign out components and methods. So let's start here. Let's add our auth server. So if we take this URL path and we go into the code, and we'll go here and we'll go to API and we'll click new file. Now we've already got these two parts already, so pages and API. So what we'll do is we'll add an auth folder and a NextAuth file as well. Don't worry about this. This is just the convention for NextAuth. So let's add it as a TS file. Ordinarily, if you're using JS, you can just copy and paste this and delete what you need. But as I'll be using Typescript, you might want to use what I'm using instead. So I'll explain to you what this is. So we're importing an auth options here. So we're creating an object, which essentially is creating auth options, and we've got the Google provider. And these are my custom authorization parameters. So this is what I want it to do, and it's typed for NextAuth options. The reason I'm saying that is if you go to the documentation, it's slightly different. There's no types here, and you kind of have to figure everything out yourself if you're doing this on TypeScript, but I've already done it for you. So you can just essentially take my return types and use it there for you. Now, for this to work, you can see that it's using process.env. It says we need to use our environment file with a Google ID and a Google secret. Now, this won't make much sense right now, but if you have experience with env files, you know that this is a node process to go and grab these variables. So let's go grab those right now. If we go to the root of the folder, we can see I've already got a example env file, and it's got our Google ID and our Google secret. And this is just an example file. You do need to include this into your folder, into your project. And then we also want a .env file. Now the .env file is never going to be committed to your GitHub, or wherever you're putting this up. This is a very personal document that has very sensitive information. These things here will help potential hackers get access to your Google Cloud information and run up really high bills, or cause all kinds of mayhem. It gives them a lot of access to your server credentials and your secrets, that basically authorize your app to do certain things with other services. So you want to minimize contact as much as possible for anyone outside of the project with this information. Where you want this information really is either on your local system for testing purposes, or you want this on your server for the server variables for them to handle it. So at no point is it just loosely out there to the public. That's what you want to avoid. So the way I would do it is I would go here and I would make sure that your .env file is ignored. I would add that in here as well. Now you can add it as a local file if you want, but I usually add it as an env. Because we are going to be using best practices, we are going to rename this to local. The reason being is in the future, you could rename this to dev or QA, depending on the server you want this to be on, or production. So being local usually means development. So we'll go and refactor that. So now that is env.local. So now this is hidden from GitHub. You can't commit this up. You can't put these secrets up. But these secrets here, Google ID and Google Secret, will show you how to go get them now. You essentially need to go to your Google Cloud Console to get these. So let's go there now and go get them. So if you go to your Google Cloud Console, you'll see that you have this credentials file on the left. I'll leave the link for this in the description so you can get to it easily. I know it can be a bit confusing getting to this page through Google, oddly enough. So to create a new one, you'd simply click Create Credentials, OAuth Client ID, Web Application, and then you put in these details here, which I'll show you what they are. And essentially those details will be this: localhost 3000 and localhost 3000 API auth callback Google. And what this will do is this will create all the correct URIs for the Google authorization, and this will work on your local host. So we know that that's created, but if you haven't created that, create that. But here you should have your client ID and your client secret, and you need to grab these two and take it over to your env file. So in your env file, add your ID and add your secret, and then you should be good to go. So now that we have that all set up, and we have our Google provider that has its client ID and its client secret added, we need to make sure that they're typed as strings. Then this should all be connected up. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go to our app folder. So if you go to Pages and App, we essentially want to wrap this in a session provider for NextAuth. So let's do that now. So now we've got the session component wrapping our component and we've made sure to keep our styles.global.css for now. We can probably delete that. Let's just have a quick look at our global styles. So styles, global styles. Yeah, it's currently adding some default styling. All right, we'll leave this for now. We'll sort this out in the styling update. Now that the session provider is added, we know that NextAuth is hugging the app so that if we want to pass authorization information amongst the pages or the other components, we now have access to it because the component is now wrapped and has access to the session information of when someone is authorized and logged in. And there's all kinds of cool things we can do with this, which we'll show you in the header shortly. One of the main ones is being able to access certain pages. So let's go and create a login component now. So we've currently got the components. So now originally we had the components within the pages folder, but I'm going to delete that now. I've got another components folder here in the source folder, which is where we want to move it to. But normally you can copy and paste that, move it in there, or just drag and drop it. Because I'm using Windows and WSL, it has all kinds of permission issues, so I just don't bother, I copy and paste. Blessed of I who use the Mac OS or Linux, and they don't really have these issues. So we now have our login folder here. So we'll delete this login folder and we will open this one. Now we've got the header and the submenu or the side menu. We need to create a new component. So we'll create the login component. In here we need to add a index file as well. as the root. So let's just go to the header. Let's just make sure this points to the right file. Export. So within our login component, we're going to add our login component with our sign in and sign out sessions. So in here, you can see that we've got the login component and we've got the sign in and sign out methodology. And all we're doing is we're adding a button to sign in or sign out, with it simply saying who we are by email if we're signed in. And if we're not signed in, it just says not signed in. And it's dependent on the session which we get from NextAuth, which is up here. So you can see that we're requesting use session from NextAuth, and you can use this on every page to do UI that is based on authentication. So you can simply have a Boolean using session to say, do I show something or do I not, based on if someone is authenticated. So with all this set up, let's go take a look. So if you refresh the page, so we've got an issue with the header, and let's go to the index file here and see what it's complaining about. So we moved the components folder. Cool. So once we've made sure that these have got the right paths now, that should work again. So let's go check it out. One thing we forgot to add is the login component. There we go. So immediately we can see that it says we're not signed in. So it's already got a current state assigned to us. It already knows that we haven't signed in at all. So what we'll do is we'll open up here. We'll go to, and now you see that we get an auth button. So we click sign in with Google, and we will just click, we'll click Curious Bytes. So now, like that, it tells us which email address we're signed in with, and it gives us all our state. But we can do more than that. We can actually grab all the information from the account, and I'll show you how. So if we go to the login component, you can see that here we've actually got the user's email, but we have more access to more stuff. We could also say signed in as, let's say, session .user .name. Go check it out. Refresh. Signed in as Curious Byte. We'll just change that to welcome. Refresh that. Welcome Curious Byte. So now we've got the name. We can also get the image. So let's do that now. But let's actually use an MUI component. So the MUI component that I want to use is the avatar. So avatar is really simple. We literally could just copy and paste that. So, and we'll take this as the name. Oop, just do that in fact. And then for this, what we'll do is we'll put image. We just need to make sure we import this from MUI. So just to be clear, before this is all done, you can see this is getting this from MUI material. Make sure that you've got MUI material installed already, NextAuth installed, and emotion styled and emotion react installed as well. I know we did this in the first video, but just double check that that is installed still. And also, for good measure, make sure you have MUI icons material installed as well, because we will be using that in the rest of the videos. So with all these installed, again, if you remember, we went to the MUI homepage and we installed it from here. But just make sure you've got that and the icons as well. If not, I'll prompt you again when we get to the icon stage. But let's refresh and have a look. And there you go. You can see now that we've got the avatar showing. We've set the avatar to use the name as well, which is coming up as C. The image, however, is not. So let's find out what's going on. The expected type comes from property alt, which is declared here on type. Okay. Let's deconstruct this a bit. Const avatar URL equals. So apparently just restarting the app just sorted that out, which is very weird. The point being, we've got the logo and the avatar working. We've got it working with the same information that we had before, which is brilliant. But now we have a sign in and a sign out state. Now we can do a lot with this. First being, we can sort out the header. So if we sign out, we now get this state. And what we'll do is we'll take some of this information. We'll take the avatar at least. We'll go to the header, add this in here. Take that, go back up here. And there we go. So we now should have the avatar. So if we see this, do we see a blank one? So nobody's signed in. So we've got this set up. And then when you sign in, there we go. We can now see our avatar there. But we want to take this one step further, and we're going to add in a proper header just as a template for now. So if we go to MUI, we're going to install the app bar component. And all we're simply going to do is just take all of this and get this functionality. So we'll have the logo here, the menus with some buttons, and a user profile with a menu. So let's now add that to the header. So we'll go down here. I'll just change this to header. And we want to grab these from up here. Bring this down here. Const header. There we go, that's all set up. We can grab that for now, but otherwise we can delete that. Right, what's it complaining about? Nothing. Right, where's the avatar? So avatar source is here, so we want to change that. We also want to change this to user dot, oops, we want to change that to session dot user dot name. So that should bring in the avatar name, and if it can't get the profile image, or if there is no profile image, it'll just show the name here. We'll set that a string as we haven't deconstructed it, so that should satisfy TypeScript. Now let's go take a look. So if you refresh that, we have avatar defined multiple times. Okay, interesting. Aha, yes. Cool, right. Let's actually put this all the way down here. Refresh that, and there we go. So now we have somewhat of a normal header, and we also have some pages. And in fact, we can actually link these up. So we can get the logout working. So if we go to logout, so these are our settings. So it'll essentially just map out settings here and put them here, which isn't essentially what we want. What we want to do is we want to have specific menu items doing certain things. So we're actually going to get rid of this map. So it's currently, we don't need a key anymore. And what we want here is we want to see, so based on the session, if the session is true, we want to say logout, and if the session is false, we'll say login. So let's just double check that that is correct. Whoops, forgot to make these a string. Cool, right, refresh that. So let's click on here. So it's saying logout, and that is correct. What we actually want this to do is sign out. So I'm hoping that imported that from NextAuth. It did. And what is this saying? So now we want a similar option here. So based off what happened, so we'll say session sign out or sign in. So what we're saying is if the session, just make sure we add this in, and that should work. And we'll get rid of these brackets here. Should be fine without it. Now this is just for testing purposes. We're going to take all this logic out anyway, because we probably want to do a bit more with this later on, but let's go check it out. So refresh this and it says log out, so let's click log out. Just refresh this before we do that. So we'll click log out. So let's sign out and sign in. We'll refresh that. So let's sign out, and that signs us out. So we are no longer signed in, and then we sign in again, and boom, there we go. So we can try this with other accounts as well. So let's sign out again and sign in. Let's try with a different email address, and that works. Now, because this email address doesn't have a user profile, it simply comes up with its initials, which is handled by Material UI. So we'll click that and click log out again. So you can see here when we hover over, it says open settings. That's not quite correct. We want it to say open profile settings or something like that. So let's go back here. It says open settings, and we'll just click open profile settings. There we go. So we've got the dashboard showing here, which is fine for now. We've got the dashboard showing here, but we don't actually want to show the dashboard until the user logs in. Let's go to the index here, and we'll just remove the login for now because we don't need it there. We'll import the session ID again. So we'll say the dashboard only shows if you're logged in, and the side menu as well. So we want both of these to load only if that the user session is. So if the user is logged in, then show these. Otherwise, do not. Now we just need to wrap these in a fragment because there's 2 elements. Cool. So if user is logged in, show the side menu in the dashboard. If not, do not show those. So refresh that. Brilliant. And we probably want a message here as well. So we want to say login or something like that. So if we go to the login page, we'll actually re-add it back. Because what we're going to do is go to the login page, and we're going to change this now. We're just going to require this to sign in and sign out. So we'll just change this to say, please log in. And we will use an MUI button to do this. We'll import that from MUI, and we'll just import the button. We don't need to import all of MUI. And we'll choose the variant, and the variant we're going to choose is contained. So we'll choose the contained variant, and we'll have the color set to primary. Actually, we'll have it set to success. Brilliant. Right, so let's go refresh that and take a look. So you can see here, please sign in. So we'll click sign in, and then we'll log in. And now we have access to the dashboard and all of that information. We can get rid of this. So we do not need that anymore. We'll change this to a button as well. And we'll change that to error. So you'll see it now says sign out, sign in, brilliant. So we've got the basics of this set up. We'll probably actually move this to within the header. So where it says signed in as user email, we'll do that. So we'll go to header, do typography, So that's MUI's version of a paragraph element. Refresh that. Cool. So probably just put this in its own box here. And there you go. We can see that it just needs a little padding. I'll just say 10. Refresh. And then we've just added a little spacing. We'll probably reduce that a bit. We use the SX property to add some custom styling properties. We'll just do that. And refresh. I'm fairly happy with that as a good starting point. And I think that means that our app is in a much better place. Now I know that the next video that we're doing is a styling video. I just have to get rid of this padding. It's killing me. It is really annoying. So look at that. This is the default styling that came with it. We're just going to get rid of that now. So let's go back. I believe that's in the global styling. So we'll go to styles. I think it's in home perhaps. Yeah, there we go. Get rid of that. Refresh. And there we go. I think that's much nicer. We can get these all linked up as well going forward. I think it's a good starting point. This is decent. So that's been authentication on our NextJS app. Essentially set up a header. We've set up our login page. We've set up our dashboard to be dynamic based on the user session, whether they're logged in or not. We've set up NextAuth, we've set up Google Authentication, and we've started to use Material UI and introduce some other elements that we'll be using far more later down the road. But with this foundation in place, this leaves us in a really good place to start working on the rest of the app. Now it's very bare bones right now, but we're about to add some styling and all the core setup and foundation we need for the styling in the next video. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for when that video is, and also follow me on the Hashton on Twitter to follow the progress as well. So stay tuned for the next video. Leave a comment below if you found that useful or if you just have any questions. But my name's Harry, and I'll catch you in the next one.